Dementia residents can be inspirationally positive if they are intellectually extended, positively socialised, and they have a purpose. So in terms of being intellectually stimulated, if they enjoy and are active in cryptic crosswords, reading the newspaper, listening to the news at night. In terms of being positively socialised, if they have at least one good friend, and if they get on well with the group, that always helps with positive socialisation. Then purpose is also very important, so that if, for example, they are a man and they feel that, the depressed woman needs some help and support and encouragement, that they, actively are involved in that. Or if they're a female, they've been a nurse and others are sick, that they help them, if they've fallen over or they need a glass of water. These are the ways that residents help each other and are able to be positively socialised and positively inspirational in a dementia unit. So just to go through some specific examples to give you some idea of how this happened at the dementia facility where I worked. So there was one resident at the dementia facility, say Theodora, and she was amazing. I mean, she was a former school teacher. That always helps with the reading aspect, but she was an avid reader. All day she would have something in front of her. I mean, she would read and speak at the same time pretty much. She could multitask actually. She always had something on the go, a magazine, a piece of art, a page of a newspaper, something she'd picked up. So she's always keeping herself intellectually stimulated. And one particular technique that she managed to pick up was learning other people's names, which was absolutely remarkable. But I'll go into that later. But she had the purpose. Her purpose was that she felt that she was like the teacher of the group, more or less, and she was. I mean, she'd encourage others to read. She'd encourage others to listen. She'd encourage others to be active, to read the newspaper, to read the magazines, to read out loud. And she did inspire residents. Before she came into the unit, she was, the residents were very shut down and shut off. I mean, actually, they just started. They weren't entirely shut down. They just started to speak and communicate. I mean, early stages. But when Theodora came in, they really felt they should, rally themselves around and make more of an effort, because she was so articulate and spoke so well, read so well, and was so dynamic that she inspired them all to at least make part of an effort. I mean, she had a very poor present memory. She could never remember where her room was, but in terms of intellectual engagement, she was fantastic. And there was another guy, and he, David, that's right, David, the former detective, say. Well, he was actually very depressed when he first came to the unit, but he, he found it really difficult because he wasn't a big reader. That really makes, if you're not a big reader and you've got all day in a dementia unit, it's a long day if you can't fill the time with reading. That's why the newspaper's so important. And he wasn't a reader. So it was really hard to find things that would engage him, because he'd been a policeman, a detective, a businessman. He'd been busy all his life, worked hard all his life, built up businesses. He wasn't used to just sitting and reading. He wasn't passive. He was an active guy, active personality. Yeah. So it really took a lot to get him, integrated, because he found it so extremely difficult, being at the unit. But in time, what happened was he started to become engaged in jigsaw puzzles. That was his big thing. That enabled him to really start garnering focus. And he actually would spend 1-2 hours, solid hours, on those jigsaw puzzles. So that was the one way, similar to, a couple of hours of reading, he could keep his concentration and focus going so that he could get away from the dementia stress and get clarity of thinking and calmness of thinking. Then he was also, in terms of purpose for him, he was fantastic. He was very good to the unwell women, the ones that were sick, and unwell. I'm not sure, when he was a policeman, maybe he'd, worked with unwell people. And he would sit by them and comfort them. He'd just be there, comfort them, and he'd stay there for hours, and he'd just sit there and say, look, I'm here to help, and I'm here to listen if they want to speak, or I'll just stay here. He was unbelievable how long he could stay with those people and these unwell residents, and he gave them such comfort, especially those that didn't have anyone, or didn't have any visitors that were coming to see them. He was their sole source, actually, sometimes for comfort. And in fact, he was so good at it that the nurses would actually wheel up the unwell residents to be beside him so that he could comfort them. So he had a very active role that the nurses were also engaging with him with, realizing, the help that these unwell unfortunate residents had. And not unfortunate really, in the sense that they were getting a lot of kind care while they were unwell with him. So it made them unfortunate to fortunate, actually, you might say, having a loving, kind, generous man sit by you for hours on end when you're unwell is a very good thing. And sometimes very unwell, of course, but still, it's a very good thing. And then the third guy, in terms of being inspirationally positive, of course, was Jack the General, the Brigadier General, who I've talked about before. I mean, he just came in positive, He refused to let anything get to him. Same as Theodora, the teacher. She always used to say, look, I never let anything get to me. And she didn't. She was half blind and, she couldn't hear very well. And she was about 94. But still, she kept going and find a way, to work through it. And Jack was similar. I mean, dapper, smart, trim, and very well spoken. And his purpose, of course, was helping all the anxious, angry women and the depressed women, lifting their spirits if they were depressed and settling them down if they were anxious. He pretty much took responsibility for the whole unit with his methods, which I've gone into before. So that was his purpose. And he was always positive. From these three people, you hardly heard a negative word from either of them. They had such a conviction with positivity. And it was so inspirational, because the thing is, it inspired the other residents, it inspired the relatives, and it inspired the staff. So in this way, it had this, positive rippling effect into the unit. I mean, I only heard one negative thing from Theodora once, and I remember she said, oh, I don't know what's happened to my brothers and sisters. I never see them. Where are they? They must be somewhere. They must have just given up on me. And then, immediately after that, she said, oh, well, chin up, onwards and upwards. She never mentioned it again. She never did see the brothers and sisters, but she never mentioned it again, and she didn't let it affect her. It's remarkable strength. I mean, she must have been like that all her life, I would think, to have that, tenacity. Her children came now and then, but not often. They were good when they did visit, but they, it was only once every few months for the son and once every couple of months for the daughter. So, it wasn't a lot to go on, but the rest of the time, her inner strength and positivity and all her activities kept her going. So these are examples of how it is possible to remain positive in a dementia unit, with, being able to be intellectually stimulated, socially, positively socialized, and having a purpose. And, it does take some effort. Some people actually just have that positivity and resilience when they come in. Theodora and Jack the General, they were like that when they first came in. It took time for Dave the detective to make it. His wife was very supportive, and he was well liked at the unit, and because he didn't read, he had to really make that effort to come up with other activities. But he did very well in the end and became a leader of the group, along with the other two, and the others, residents were helped enormously as a result. So this is the two books here, The Resident's Voice from a Dementia Unit and The Resident's Rise from a Dementia Unit. In the description below, there are links. There's a link for these. So thank you for your likes and your support.